The frustration that Israel faces now with his current sneaker experience when he wants certain shoes is a level of disenfranchisement that is happening, meaning Nike is allowing certain people access to the shoes, knowing exactly what they're going to do to them. And then there's the people who are boxed out who really want them, have genuine intent, love the shoes, and want them.
Right.
My only concern is that that repeats itself in the metaverse regarding access to the tech and the tools you need to enjoy that experience.
Hey, Shawn, how are you?
Hey, how we doing?
We're doing well, thank you.
Cool.
I think we're going to have Israel join us as well.
Okay.
I like what you've got it next to you. Those look pretty nice. You've got two Nike, a red or an orange and a yellow right behind you.
Yeah, it's a very bright orange LeBron James volume 10. And then behind those are my X-Men Cyclops Nike Reacts.
So are those the really special ones that nobody else has, or they're the rarest ones?
Those are literally the only pair of those in existence because I worked with Nike's customization site to make them.
Oh, okay.
Wow. Do you ever wear them?
Yeah, I just had those on yesterday, actually.
So does that diminish the value?
Not to me. There's two narratives at play with stuff like that. There's perceived value if you plan on selling them, and then there's storytelling and emotional personal value, which for me is more because I'm an exhibition curator and I've been in the shoes for so long. What's up, Israel?
Hey, how's it going, man?
All right, you?
Excellent.
First off, why don't you describe, Shawn, what you do so that everybody in the audience knows?
I'm Shawn Williams of Obsessive Sneaker Disorder and Social Studies Sneaker Industry Education Program. Been into shoes for over 35 plus years. I've owned thousands of pairs in my lifetime and still buying. Unfortunately, it's an addiction that can't be stopped. Thus the name of our company, Obsessive Sneaker Disorder. I'm also an educator and exhibition curator. I've done exhibitions that have been seen by millions of folks around the world. And I do truly believe that every sneaker is an individual story in a box. So that sums up pretty much where it began for me and where it goes.
Israel, did you have sneakers growing up?
Oh, once I could start buying them myself.
Yeah.
But prior to that, my mom wasn't too big on sneaker culture.
Wait, why? We need to know why. Why?
She just not seeing the value of what a person had on their feet, or not understanding the social metric that it actually was to my life. She didn't understand. So she would buy us shoes from like Payless or Kmart with plastic soles that would wear off and leather that would wrinkle and crinkle and crack, shoes that would fall apart. And she would buy me shoes a size bigger so that I could wear them long enough to grow into them.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I got a pair of shoes that was $40. They were suede Pumas, the low top, the classic Puma with the Puma sign on it. And I wore those until those fell apart. But once I had my own money, I became proficient at collecting sneakers. But lately, I really am fed up with the industry because it's so hard to get a sneaker that you want. They have these apps, and unless you have bots, you have to buy them aftermarket and all these things. They're purposely making sneakers harder to get to drive up the secondary value and creating frenzies that end in violence in every major city, constant. So that's when now I have a little bit of issue with the current sneaker industry.
So Shawn, what did you see when you were a kid that got you into sneakers? Did you see a sneaker and you're like, aha, this is the moment?
Well, for us growing up in, late 70s, early 80s, I was born in 71. I just turned 50 last week. Mm-hmm. So hip hop was a growing phenomenon. Mm-hmm. And growing up in New York City, you were into sneakers because you wanted to look fresh and cool. And there wasn't the choices that are available now. And the companies that were around then didn't exist. Like, Nike wasn't around. Nike wasn't a factor or a player in any decision-making for sneakers for me when I was young.
But you say hip hop, are they tied together? Are shoes
Absolutely.
and hip hop tied together?
Tell us, and how does that, because sneakers have been around a long time. Hip hop was emerging. It was an iteration of another kind of music. We know that. What was that convergent and why did hip hop claim the sneaker?
Well, hip hop claimed the sneaker because it was anti-establishment. So sneakers have been a part of hip hop culture from the beginning for that very reason. Respectively, we all remember when sneakers couldn't get you into a lot of places.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't go to church, couldn't go to work, couldn't go to certain clubs, couldn't go to do a lot of things that people are now doing in sneakers.
So did you see that on Dougie Fresh or on, who did you see it on and go, wow, I got to get that pair of shoes the first time?
There was nobody that influenced us on that level yet because we were all budding celebrities in our own rights, in our own experiences.
Right.
So, I'm one of those folks who at this age, I've come up out of where you see all of those famous people who now.
Right.
I was one of them before they became who they became. So that existence and that experience and that way of dress and everything that you see, that was all of us. When Run DMC had that iconic moment in Madison Square Garden where they said in 1986, everybody take off your Adidas and put them in the air. They were asking for that moment to be a reflective of what already existed. They didn't make that moment in that they made Adidas Superstars popular for everybody. If they would have made that request and only one person put a pair in the air, then that isn't really an indication of how popular Adidas are. But they said that knowing that there were thousands of people out there who wore Adidas Superstars. That was the moment that was a reflection of who we all were, not just them. And it's the same thing growing up. So there was no Nike back then. There was Pony, there was Pro Kids, there was Adidas, there was Puma, a few others, but Nike was not a factor in any of that. And, that existence of frustration that Israel is sharing now is really, like a modern day experience that Nike started and some other companies have also followed in creating that barrier of experience for sneakers. But that's a challenge that exists for people who, if those are the kind of sneakers that's all you go after. See, for me, I have 30 different brands of sneakers in my closet. So while there's a barrier to get the latest Nike or Adidas sneaker, there's no barrier to get, certain Pumas and certain things from Diadora, Fila, New Balance, Reebok. There's no barrier to getting those. And I can easily get those. Anyone can easily get those because those are more stories to tell.
Did you, do you remember the first Air Jordan?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
And what was that moment like? Because that was a pretty influential shoe at the time. Yeah.
No, it wasn't. And that's one of the things that I think is amazing about the wonders of marketing. Nike's the best storytelling company in the world. They're a great storytelling company that just happens to sell sneakers. But there's hidden codes to the story of how Jordans really weren't popular when they first came out. And one of those is the adoption from skateboard culture. The Jordan 1 sneaker was a big sneaker among skateboarders because it was cheap and you could grab it off the table and you could shred it and you wouldn't care. Now that's contrary to the illusion of the fact that in 85, when they came out, they just were bonkers and everybody had to have them at $65. That wasn't the truth. A lot of people were buying them twist tied off of tables for $25, including the skaters. And if you were in a city where Michael Jordan was a nemesis, which is pretty much the entire NBA, well, let's just say major cities like New York, where we had Patrick Ewing and Charles Oakley and the like.
Yeah.
We didn't care about Air Jordans. We hated Air Jordans.
What was the first kind of shoe that was an explosion? Was it the Adidas with Run DMC?
For me, it was that shoe because I was around for that. It wasn't an Air Jordan. It was 86, 87, when Adidas gave Run DMC their deal for the apparel and the footwear. I was around for that. And a lot of what modern day sneaker culture's narrative is they try to sell you that it was the Air Jordan 1. When I was around for the moment that was bigger than that for us, because again, we're kids of hip hop growing up. So the Air Jordan thing wasn't a big deal for us. For number one, we hated Michael Jordan as a basketball player, admired his talent and gave him his props as the NBA star he was. But if you had New York pride, you didn't rock anything from Chicago with Chicago Bulls. It was all about the blue and orange.
So the barrier to entry, this financial thing that now I think Israel's talking about, and also knowing where to go to get the latest drop. I mean, there's a store down the street where I live in Santa Monica, like they get up at 2 a.m. to get the latest shoe, right? But what was the financial, what was happening with the Run DMC shoe, for example? Was the barrier low enough or high enough? Could people get the shoe that wanted to get the shoe?
Easily you could get the shoes. There was no issue.
So what happened? When did Nike explode as the shoe company?
With Air Jordan.
But later.
let's just say the narrative and the storytelling was set with the Air Jordan 1 that set them up for future success.
And for a long time, as an outsider, it seemed like Nike sort of had it to themselves. And then at a certain point, there's been an explosion of Kanye and, just all sorts of people making shoes. Do I have that right? Or has it been like that the whole time?
Nope. The funny thing is, from the late 80s into the early 90s, Reebok was the more popular company, even with Michael Jordan around. Reebok was making incredible product from what's called their Blacktop line.
Pumps.
They were doing a lot of things with like folks like Emmett Smith and so many other athletes Reebok had. And then their storytelling at that time was just so strong that a lot of sneakers that were made between the late 80s and early 90s were responses to Reebok sneakers. Like, there were designers who were having Post-it notes put on their desk, and someone would say, "What's your response to this Reebok shoe?" And they would have to get to work on designing something that was going to compete with what Reebok was doing. These are facts.
Who was then the first celebrity sports influencer and the first shoe? Just to kind of give audience context, like what is that for? Even maybe it's before Run DMC. Was there like, okay, we're going to do it with so-and-so athlete?
Well, there's two things at play here. There's the athlete influence on what sneaker culture is and what sneakers were, and there's the celebrity influence. So if you want to take it from the athletic perspective, for us, it goes all the way back to 1971 with Kareem and 1973 with Clyde Frazier. That's where the athlete influence in sneakers starts. Those two greats right there, who thankfully are still with us today and can tell their stories.
Did Kareem have a shoe, or are you saying he
1971, Adidas gave him the Jabbar.
Wow. And now, are any of those still around?
Adidas still puts out the Jabbar on occasion, and Puma has literally never stopped making the Puma Clyde since 1973. It's one of the few sneakers in the industry that has never been retroed because they never stopped making it. So part two, the celebrity comes in again with us with Run DMC. They open the door for everybody.
So how does Kyrie or Steph think about the shoes? Because they all have their own shoes now. Kevin Durant seems very interested in the shoes. So, what's it? How is it different now? How culturally is it important now?
The shift has gone from the influence of the athlete to the influence of the entertainer. So if you look at the model of Michael Jordan, be like Mike, that's why the shoes became popular, because we all wanted to be like Mike collectively. I never did personally, but a lot of people wanted to be like Mike. It was relatable. It was approachable. It was something to strive for. He was aspirational in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Thus leading.
Any of us could be like Michael Jordan. I mean, what's the big deal?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I know you do that. You pick up a ball and you do that on the weekends. I know that. But
we got a lot of talent in our family, but basketball isn't one of the things.
But the relatability shifted to wanting to be more like the rapper, entertainer, influencer, as opposed to that type of talent that a Michael Jordan and many people like that represent. People have seen it easier to be successful as a rapper, musician, actor than it is to be a dedicated athlete to a sport. And at that point, that's where the shift in influence in sneaker culture moved from the athlete to all of the other people who are non-athletic. Because even those people, funny enough, were inspired by the drive of athletes to do what they do, but they weren't athletes.
Israel, I don't think of you as an athlete. I think of you spending a lot of time in front of your computer screen or on phones. Like, what do shoes mean to you? Do you recognize people when you're walking around with shoes and things?
Yeah, of course. I buy a lot of shoes now, and I'm trying to actually find kids with size 13s in different places that I can send my shoes to. But shoes for me are just a fashion. There's something there. It's an accessory. But then what I look at really around these things is the business of shoes. So that's where my mind shifts to, is when we're talking about the athletes. Now, before, the athlete used to get a shoe and the athlete would make, now the shoe deal is every single athlete, when they come into the league, has some type of shoe deal of some sort. My friend Randy Foy, he had a deal with Nike, and they get player editions of the shoe given to them. They may not be a popular shoe brand. And then those elite athletes like a Steph Curry and a Kevin Durant will all get their own shoe. And LeBron before he even came into the league, had a Nike deal that gave him $100 million before he even entered into the NBA, which Jordan scoffed at because he said it was a little bit premature.
He probably got it. I mean, that deal's probably cheap now, for how many shoes they sold.
Absolutely. I think that there's a big business around sneakers, and I look at that a lot.
But it seems like it went like this for a long time, or maybe like that. And then all of a sudden it just went bam. What caused that, Shawn? What was there an explosion, or is that just in my head?
No, there was an explosion right around the early 2000s. The explosion happened because of retro releases of sneakers. Back in the original life cycle of sneakers, once they were gone, they were gone. And all of the storytelling and the folklore and urban legend of these shoes, in particular with Michael Jordan, led to the desire for others who couldn't get them before for whatever reasons. Could be Israel's case where, financially it wasn't a thing for him to get at the time. Once retro releases came and people were able to start getting these shoes again and owning their personal stake in these stories, that's when you got into the retro market, and the retro market led to the resale market. And now the resale market has sort of positioned the sneaker industry to go into overdrive, because globally, the actual spend right now for sneakers is 80 billion globally.
Yeah. Wow.
And about 25 to 30 billion of that is predicted in the next couple of years will be the resale market.
Can I ask you about the folklore part, which is really important? That is something you deal a lot with. And just to give us context, what are we saying? How do we go deeper? What is that folklore?
That folklore is the legend of Michael Jordan, the legend of, all the old stories that have been told from not just even Michael Jordan, the Penny Hardaways, the Scottie Pippens, Shaquille O'Neals, all the elite NBA stars, the Grant Hills, Jerry Stackhouses, all these NBA stars, and all the marketing that went behind selling those shoes back then. There were great commercials. There was merch that went along with these things. You could join, like Jordan Brand at one point had something called the Jordan Brand Flight Club that you could join. It was more than just about selling a shoe to you. You were becoming a part of a story. You were invested in the commercials when you saw them on Saturdays, and they inspired you. It was the pop-up displays in the stores for certain athletes. There were no release dates. So back then, you didn't know when a sneaker was coming out. You just saw that it was being promoted, that it was coming soon. So there was the retail experience that was a part of that. Hey, man, could you let me know when those new Shaquille O'Neals come out? Could you let me know when those new Jordans are coming? I really want those. Those commercials just got me going crazy. So there was a retail piece. There was a relationship with retail. It was a neighborhood thing. There was so many other moving parts to selling sneakers that people had to invest themselves in to get them and be a part of it, that if you weren't able to get them and you missed out on that, once the retros came, it gave you that second shot.
Who invented the sneaker? Was it only for the athlete? Is it just a shoe that makes you run around a court or a tennis court or a basketball? You know what I mean? Who was the first sneaker? Who did the first sneaker?
So here's what I love about that question, right? Everyone back in the 1800s, for the most part, played their sports in shoes until this revolutionary process called the vulcanization of rubber happened. And when the vulcanization of rubber happened around the mid 1800s, only people who could afford to have their shoes made with vulcanized rubber to play their sports could afford them. So sneakers from their very inception started as an aspirational item.
Wow.
So you had to have the money and resources to go and get your shoes made from vulcanized rubber bottoms to go play any particular sport that it was. Now, mind you, the time frame that I'm talking about, just to show you the gravity of what we are talking about today, I'm talking about a time when basketball wasn't even invented yet.
I was just going to say, what were they playing? Was it tennis? What were they playing?
Yeah, so there was the tennis and all the other, small ball-based sports and running around and all the other sports that predate basketball to some degree that people put on vulcanized rubber shoes to play in when you had the resources to afford vulcanized rubber shoes. So when I hear of companies like the Yves Saint Laurents and Balenciagas and everybody saying, oh, we're taking sneakers to another level, now they're high fashion and aspirational, they obviously don't know their history because sneakers started that way.
When did they become really collectible?
I would say once people saw the value of them to the point where they decided, I'm not going to wear them, I'm just going to keep them and stockpile them and sell them. And it became the kind of thing where there's two trains of thought. There's, like we started out with, there's folks like me who my value in sneakers is behind the stories that they represent and my emotional connection, which is why I keep them and wear them and use them for exhibitions and teaching. That's the value of them for me. That's my determination for what stays and what goes and what I'm even going to spend. And then there's the guy who goes, these are $170 today, but if I put these up on a website like StockX or Goat or Flight Club, I can easily get $350 to $400. So there's the business mindset behind being able to flip them for a profit,
right,
which has no emotional value to anyone. It's just purely economics. And then there's folks like me.
Can you tell us about the obsessive sneaker disorder? I mean, really what it is, and it's your company, but tell us the mission of that company.
So Obsessive Sneaker Disorder actually started as the first sneaker podcast in the industry in 2007. So there's, tons of podcasts in all walks of life now, but there was none for sneakers. So my partner D Wells had the harebrained idea of starting a sneaker podcast. And literally the first show is just him ranting on October 27th, 2007 about the dissatisfaction with what Nike was doing for the Air Force One 25th anniversary.
right.
And it blossomed from there to something where at, our peak, and this is before people knew what podcasts were, where people were asking us what radio station could we tune into to catch your podcasts. And it reached a point where people in the industry were listening to our podcast to figure out how to do their jobs in marketing, in legal, research and development, community outreach. We were getting messages from people at the Nikes, Adidas, and Pumas of the world, and they were saying, listen, people at our company are listening to your show to figure out what they're doing for upcoming seasons and for this sneaker and for, this activation with this athlete. So we were literally like talking about things like endorsement, tech, lawsuits. We had designers that we were bringing on the show, and nobody ever talked to sneaker designers before. People didn't even know who designed the shoes.
Right.
And we were talking to those people, giving their story out to the world. So from that, it led to consulting. And when we started consulting and we started going to the main headquarters for a lot of these companies, we started seeing that there was a lack of diversity. People of color aren't there. There's no women. There's, a middle-aged white guy designing a whole collection of seasonal women's shoes with no woman's input.
Right.
And we started seeing what was wrong with that, in that everything started to look the same, but just in pastel colors.
Right.
And we knew women from all different walks of life who were like, we don't want that. Why do they keep making that? So we realized that the barrier to a lot of what was happening was, number one, sneakers being the best kept secret when you work in that industry. People weren't coming back, and they weren't giving out the knowledge and the tools for the future generation to come into the industry. So we had enough of that. And by 2011, OSD started our education program called Social Studies, SOLECIAL. So in starting that, we said the mission is going to be give people that education and knowledge base that they need to now take even skills that they have from other disciplines and see how transferable they are to working in sneakers, and show them that there's that dotted line and that parallel universe that exists, and their skill set is needed in that area.
So, you and Israel have been friends for how long?
A couple years now.
So, Israel's obviously on the cutting edge of technology, is an artist, a business person. Now we're talking about bringing these shoes to the metaverse. What do you think about that? Are you excited about it? What do you think?
I'm absolutely excited about it, in that the sneaker industry, as I stated earlier, is probably one of the oldest and behind the times industries there is. And as much as the brands would like to, give you the illusion that with every new sneaker, there's a new tech advancement, it's really smoke and mirrors, in that sneakers are all still being made the exact same way ever since the mass production of sneakers began in the early 1900s. There has been not much of a change in the way a sneaker is made. There have been changes, but not many. So for an industry that claims to be so, avant-garde and fashion forward, the truth is that being able to have a shoe that represents existence as an NFT and with functionality in a metaverse, which are functionalities and experiences that other industries have already taken part in, it shows how behind the times sneakers are. The sneaker industry definitely needs to grow up. And there's issues like supply and demand and forecasting for the future, and being able to accurately dictate exactly who your sneaker customer is.
Right.
These are things that can be knowledge and information that can be obtained through this functionality and experience of NFTs in the metaverse. So I'm excited about all of those things that eventually every company is going to have to adapt to.
Right. Israel, how do you feel about the sneakers entering the metaverse?
I feel good about everything looking into the future. I think that a lot of things in fashion, we have a lot of waste and we have a huge environmental impact that's brought on fashion. And I have some really great ideas on how to curb that waste and still allow a person the ability to change their fashion. And I like the idea of these digital items both physical and digital, connecting both of the worlds, and also decentralized identities, these decentralized identities and people in these avatars. These people have collections of NFTs like Bored Apes, and now they're going to need clothes for their ape to change their ape eventually as they begin to travel around these worlds as their avatar. And so I look forward to that aspect, as well as connecting the two, that world and this world.
I love that.
All our shopping experiences as well.
I love that, Israel, because this idea again, and do we think it'll be satisfying or will be sated? In other words, we might be able to buy a pair of sneakers, but I can buy 5 more. And and satisfy my desire to collect and to, like you said, to have them. But also, I want to get back to the sort of something that you brought up originally. I hear it in what Shawn is saying as well, sort of the fairness, the inclusion, the financial fairness as well of, will they be available? What will be the barrier? Do you think about that when we think about sneaker NFT so that people can get them, right? So it's still, how are you thinking about that? Or the, democratization of some of the things we've all been talking about earlier, with regards to the metaverse. How do we think about that part of it so that you can have more and more people have access?
Yeah, there's still going to be some level of exclusivity, but that exclusivity isn't determined by the immediate price. The person, there's a person with Bored Ape that bought their Bored Ape for $228, and now it's worth $250,000 just because they were, and I was there, but I obviously didn't see the value, but they were there and they saw the value in collecting this thing. Now those individuals, regardless of their geographic location or their color, but as long as they have internet access, the playing field is near even. Every single individual has the ability to plug into this. And so that's the most interesting thing, but there has to be limitations, because the limitation around being able to get something is what drives up the value. But also we can create systems. Right now, they found a sneaker executive at Nike that was actually taking a large portion of the shoes off the market with her son and putting them in storage facilities and reselling them. They've also have several individuals running bots that take advantage of these sneaker auctions and things like that. With blockchain, which is a ledger system, we can curve some of that and make it more complex for people to take advantage of the system. So I think I see a lot of potential there.
Shawn, do you think you're going to enjoy the digital aspect of this?
I think everybody will. And my only concern is, and this is something that Israel has heard me address before in our conversations, is the frustration that Israel faces now with his current sneaker experience when he wants certain shoes. Is a level of disenfranchisement that is happening, meaning Nike is allowing certain people access to the shoes,
right,
knowing exactly what they're going to do to them. And then there's the people who are boxed out who really want them, have genuine intent, love the shoes and want them.
Right.
My only concern is that repeats itself in the metaverse regarding access to the tech and the tools you need to enjoy that experience. So that's something that I'm working on, because there's 2 problems at play here. There's, number one, the sneaker industry and sneaker culture has not caught up yet in terms of what it means to be involved with NFTs and crypto and blockchain and everything that Israel just stated.
Yeah.
And you're talking about the existence of people who are contributing to an $80 billion industry who know nothing about what he just said or anything that will make their life better based on what he just said. How do you get those people caught up to speed? How do you bridge the gap between what they don't know and what they should know to improve their experience? And then also you got to think about the kids who are coming up behind them. There's people lacking internet. Just lacking internet in this day and age cuts you off from a lot of things.
Yeah.
So we have to worry about a repeat of the elitism again. Before things really are in a wonderful place where everybody can benefit from what NFTs and the metaverse and crypto and blockchain have to offer. It is a concern of mine personally as someone who teaches in neighborhoods right now where kids don't have the basics. They don't have Web 2 and we're talking Web 3.
Yeah, but I just want to say, because as a person who's tried to wear Nike, they don't work for most people. I'm just going to be really clear. They're for a very narrow foot. And I mean, they may be beautifully designed, but I think that how they have the monopoly, which you kind of addressed a little bit earlier, is kind of surprising to me. And my other question to both of you is the sneaker an export? Is it an American product, or is it now owned globally? Like, are we the sneaker center of the world?
I would say we've always been the sneaker center of the world in that we drive a lot of trend, we influence a lot of innovation, and even for lack of, agreement from other parts of the world, our sports are the dominant sports that influence purchases and experiences in a lot of ways. Now, that is not to take away from the fact that on the other side of the world, the sports we hold dear do not even light a candle, to what drives and moves the needle in those other countries.
Right.
And that's where I think of sneakers and the excitement of it being a global culture, not something that is just an American-based experience. I have sneakers in my closet from countries I haven't been to yet.
Wow.
From friends and people who live in these places who said, hey, you want those? I got you. So there's that global reach that we also have to keep in mind that influences the relationships, the storytelling, and the experiences that I think in the metaverse will only heighten and be valued more once everybody can access them in a way that everyone has the great experience that we know they could have.
Right. Well, it's a whole new world.
Wait, Shawn, can you bring your two sneakers to the front of your camera behind you? Are you comfortable doing that?
Sure.
Those are so cool. Before you jumped on, Israel, we were looking at these. They really stuck out when Shawn jumped on. What's the story there?
So
Was it bronze?
These for me are an economic play. These are the LeBron 10 EXT model. This is a very expensive model of LeBron sneaker. I didn't pay a very expensive price.
Right.
So in New York, there used to be a store called Century 21. You guys all may familiar with.
Right.
And Century 21 is one of those places where you quote unquote go sneaker hunting.
Yeah.
So this shoe was originally $225, but I found it in Century 21 for the low price of $76.
Right.
So at $225, there's no way I buy this sneaker. Not to play ball in.
Yeah.
But for $76, I buy it. And not even just me played ball in it. I even lent this to my son to play ball in.
Right.
So it's a flashy sneaker. It gets attention, but we bought it with the intention of, or I bought it with the intention of, it's a good come up. That's what we call a come up when we get something for that kind of markdown. And then it's going to be an attention getting shoe if I decide to just even casually wear it on the street. So that's the story behind that one. And the story behind this sneaker right here is a custom Nike by You sneaker that I made. I started doing an X-Men series because I'm a big fan of the X-Men. So this sneaker is the latest in my series, and I made this one dedicated to Cyclops. So I also have a Professor X, and I have a Nightcrawler sneaker that I made years ago.
When people see those, do they just want the shoe immediately?
Some people do. They ask me, where did I get these and how could I get them? And every now and then, like what I did with the Nightcrawlers when I did those in 2018 was I posted them and I said, 15 pairs available. Put your order in now. They will go quickly and they'll only be available for a short time.
Right.
And I ended up selling 30 pairs of these.
Wow.
But do women buy sneakers at the rate of men? What's the proportion?
Yes, they do. And that's one of the things that I think, it upsets me that the woman's story and the woman's existence in the industry is not told to that level. There are women in sneaker culture who are collectors and lovers of sneakers who do it just as good as the men, some even better, in terms of they know why they buy the shoes that they buy. They have stories and things that, mean something to them, which triggers a purchase. And, they have that value similar to what I said about the emotional connection to things. And some of that has nothing to do with sports. And I think the woman consumer is also taken for granted in that she's not a single person buyer. She's buying for her kids, she's buying for her man, she's buying for, other people in the family.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those purchase reasons are taken for granted in that the sneaker companies don't feel that women need to have enough priority as far as their own product. And that's bothered me for a very long time.
So something to work on then.
Yeah, exactly.
It has been for about 20 years. That's the issue is Priscilla needs to be in that situation, in that room.
Exactly. I just want to say, we'll let you go and come back again once we're in the metaverse, but it's funny because I only wear sneakers and that's all I wear. I mean, I don't have a lot of variety, but I was picking up a new pair on Saturday, and the young man that was helping me at the store, I felt like I told him we were doing something on sneakers, and he was so excited that the way that he fit me for these sneakers, the way that he tied the shoe, he had so much knowledge about the history of the shoe that I was wearing. And then he had these incredible shoes on. And when you really, like you said, there's a story. And so I think don't look up, look down. Let's see what people are wearing. That's what I say.
Yeah.
To be continued. I'll help you.
Well, thank you.
Shoes.
I want to thank you guys for having me on. This is great to share these perspectives and stories.
Yeah.
Again, for me, I do everything in sneakers with 3 words in mind, and that's appreciate, educate, and elevate. And, working with folks like Israel and seeing how he's such a thought leader and such a sharp tech person has made me realize there are additional layers of what that could mean.
Yeah.
I'm happy and excited to be working with him on, and he's been a good advocate, not just for, folks in tech, but also for folks in sneakers to bridge that gap. So I'm excited about where the industry is right now, and excited about, again, what it still means to wear every pair.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you for coming on. Hope to see you again here soon.
Yeah, I'm happy to be on at any time, man. Thank you guys for having me. This was fun. You don't have to twist my arm to talk sneakers.
Clearly, with the first podcast.
I learned a lot. I learned a few things listening to you talk about sneakers. So my ears perked up when they asked you what the first sneaker was, because I knew you knew, and it's a question that I never thought to ask, and it was good to hear your description of that. So
I'm here, bro. I'm here.
Thank you guys very much.
See you later.
Thanks, you guys.
Everyone.